that thanks to the love, support and sharing of the community that has followed us here on YouTube, we have been able to build a village for special needs children in crisis out in Tanzania. Our family in Tanzania is now made up of nearly 200 children. Most of these children have disabilities, and most of these children are among the most marginalised human beings in our human story. You have seen the suffering on this channel, I won't go over it, but these children had no access to housing, medical care, some were abandoned, and they certainly didn't get quality care, some of them. It is only thanks to the love, support and the partnership of persons in this community that we have been able to make this family a reality, that we have been able to bring these children out of the dark and into the light where they belong. To all who have partnered with what we do, thank you for your love and support. We simply can't do what we do without you. If you are not involved in our family and you are interested in helping us to eradicate this problem that we face inside the human story, eradicate this problem that these children are facing and don't need to face, then we have launched a new partnership program. If you visit www.sharetanzania.com/partnership, you will see all of the details there. Ultimately, these partnerships help us to sustain our family, to provide everything we need to these children to make sure they are happy. And in return with that, we'll provide you with regular updates and a newsletter every month as well, so as you can see exactly how your act of love and sharing is impacting the world and the lives of these children in the same way that I get to see it. I, like many of you, was unable to avoid the performance at the Grammys by Sam Smith, a performance which has been labelled satanic, a performance whereby the artist and his entourage wanted to represent the form of Satan in the way they dressed, in the attire of the red suit and the devil horns. And this symbol, this symbology, albeit for many seen as comedic, that represents this force, Satan, this force of darkness in the world. And they were singing a song called Unholy. And of course the word unholy means to be wicked, to be sinful. But the song lyrics were about, and I will use the language, not about a father or a dad, but about daddy, hiding a hedonistic affair from mammy. And so they use the innocent language of a child in the lyrics. And it's about daddy leaving his kids at home whilst he goes off to get lucky, indulging in his hedonism, in his worldly, secretive life. And so a terrible message to anyone listening to it. And beyond there, they also sang Daddy Balenciaga, which is a company which recently clearly has been caught out doing particular ad campaigns which have some very sinister undertones to them. Now, I've seen many narratives on this, and I want to come at this purely spiritually. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but spiritual wickedness in high places. And I share this in the hope that some of this information and knowledge can assist some humans out there who hear my voice to protect your family home from these people and what they are doing. And also to raise the very important question, is there a secret religion of darkness running rampant in the West behind closed doors? When I share this, it is in total hope. You shouldn't leave any of this feeling fearful. And if you still wrestle with fear, take some time to find the true spirit, for God has not offered you a spirit of fear, but of love and compassion. When the presence of God is solidified in your life, when you have the foundation in that consciousness, fear is eradicated. It's a guarantee. And so move through this with hope. There is nothing to fear. but we must point out this activity. And if nothing else, it's important to point out if there are such great lengths to represent and worship certain gods, like Baal or Baal, however you want to pronounce it, then it should lead us to understand that doing the opposite of what these dark forces are doing is the truth. If they are so set on hiding biblical symbology of a god, which they have done, a god, Baal, who isn't a child sacrifice, shouldn't we be looking at the opposite? Why are they so focused on that? What is it that has such importance for them? Now I come to you also as a man from a rare position. The organisation that I started and was led to start by God during fasting and prayer has helped thousands of families over the last 8 years. 10 years in total, 8 years since it was registered. Among those families were children and families who were victims, however, of witch doctor religions. These are open religions in that part of the world who actually sacrifice children. Literally, people's children are kidnapped, children with special needs, children with albinism, and in East Africa they find the body mutilated with parts missing, just dumped on the street, perhaps even that same night, because they want, sadly, and I am sorry to share this grotesque truth of humanity, but it's important, they want the body parts for their rituals. And so I have physically had children handed to me by the police and said, this child, someone tried to kidnap them last night to sacrifice them, can you protect them? It's real. And what I have seen in these religions is that there is a force that feeds on fear, pain and suffering in this world, and that it seems to have some degree of power. For those who offer it fear, pain and suffering, they seem to receive some kind of worldly reward at times. And so that force I point at with the term Satan. Now I am not so naive as to believe that Sam Smith was necessarily openly saying that he is worshipping Satan. I'm not so naive to say that Sam Smith even may have a belief in Satan, because I know this, that men and women in this world who are in bondage to Satan, and in bondage means you operate merely as a fuel cell to feed the satanic matrix of energy extraction, extracting your soul essence from within you. They don't even know Satan exists, or that there is a fallen force doing that to them. They just live in that bondage, unaware. Some who serve Satan, they also don't know. They can operate on behalf of Satan and not realize that they're serving Satan, because Satan embellishes them in so much hedonistic, outward, worldly, fleshly desires, and feeds them a false image of freedom, that freedom is to fulfill your every worldly desire, not to overcome desire, that they are so spiritually barren that they become an access point for Satan to move in them, for the demonic realm to move in them, for their frequency is so worldly, and they love it so deeply because they believe it's righteous, and freedom and the pursuit of freedom, this immense liberal, have every desire you possibly want, this is the freedom they know. That in that space their worldly frequency is accessible by the demonic, and some do this having had a supernatural experience in speaking with the enemy, speaking with the fallen, with the demonic, and making a pact. Others are pawns who are just soulless and lost in hedonism, and therefore accessible by the enemy. The song that Sam Smith sang is promoting the notion of a hedonistic way of life. And you see, the equation is simple when you understand the demonic. The notion is, the demonic trap is to keep your awareness locked, to keep you stimulated in your flesh and in your mind. This is the goal of the demonic. This is the plan of the demonic, to keep you locked inside the flesh, overstimulated in the flesh constantly. And so long as you are in there, When you watch one of these stage shows, they drag you with excitement into your flesh. And most humans need to slow down and relax and recenter back to the truth of who they are, where they connect to their soul. But now they throw these stage shows and people are so out here in the flesh, they never relax back. They never settle back to the centered space where they know their soul again. And so this is the want of them. And they do that because here you have the generous heart of God pouring forth all creation, including infinite potential and free will. Those who surrender to that, they nurture their energy as sacred, and as they do, they develop a compassionate heart, and they move in that which we have pointed at with the term Christic, that which is righteous. They look after the vitality of their life to serve one another, to build on the behalf of a wonderful, compassionate God. But the majority of humans can't preserve that vitality to know God, because every day they're caught in the matrix, the satanic matrix's trap of selling their energy. So the soul essence is building up, but before it gets chance, they run off and spend it in pleasure, worldly pleasure, 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 pleasure. And they just continue selling out their soul essence. And so you get a different type of human being to the one who builds it up and moves in the spirit and compassion of the Christic. These performances stimulate you into your flesh. The equation is to keep you identified with flesh and mind, and there you will identify others as flesh and mind, and you will lose the connection to the voice and the will and the conscience of your soul, which is the connection to God. And when that happens, the body operates like a prison in this world. You become entombed in a body and its impulses and its intellectual want for pleasure. You're lost inside of it. This song, aside from the performance, was singing a message into the consciousness of mankind and into our children, probably more specifically, of hedonism, of adultery being normal. Now, as you look at that, you can say this has an influence on the subconscious of the child. It alters their psychology to slowly accept this more hedonistic way of life. In olden times, you called that spell casting. And therefore, in olden speak, you could easily argue the label black magician to be assigned to people like Sam Smith. Or you could assign the word satanic priestess, witch, sorceress, to be assigned to others who are casting spells in the industry. Like Cardi B, who cast a phenomenal spell into mankind, and everybody started doing even the same body movements off the back of this song with horrendous lyrics that were thrown into the consciousness of our children. She can call herself Christian if she wishes, but she's casting spells for hedonism into humanity. That's a sorcery. Now, if you even look at those who have been doing it for a long time, if we stay with that olden language and say that you could apply that, let's argue you could apply the language of spell casting to call things what they may work for some to hear. Madonna would be a high priestess, casting spells with her songs for a long time. If you were to adopt the language that the subconscious effect of music on a human can be deemed as spell casting, and someone like Madonna, who spoke about corrupting a virgin, etc., became famous for it, stay in that world long enough, have you seen her appearance? It begins to reflect. For the loving heart of God that knit her together in her mother's womb, that voice of acceptance is lost for the voice of separation of a separate personal identity, meanness, self. And this is a generated image of who you are in the mind, but I'll get onto that shortly, how we get free from the spell casting and the bondage of the enemy doing these things. And so the longer you stay there, the more apparent it's going to be that you are gathering the erosion of human souls, because it will reflect upon your countenance even. And so, black magicians, spell casting, witches, sorcerers, it's a real terminology you can use for what we have in modern language said, this has a cultural impact, this influences children, this This influences the subconscious of a child to accept hedonism, to say it's normal for daddy to sneak around hedonistically and get lucky. Not to do it in a bad way, but to get lucky behind mummy's back. And what happens there is you raise up a generation of children who are a little bit more numb to hedonism. They think it's normal. The false image of freedom is sold to them. And then you have the perfect fuel cell. The whole system. Kids grow up 5 generations from now. If they have no morality taught into them and they believe this false image of freedom to pursue your every worldly and bodily desire, then our children are going to be further and further identified with the flesh and with the mind, and we are going to begin to lose our soul essence from a younger age, and we are going to sell our souls as it's culturally appropriated to do so. And this is the subliminal spell casting leads towards that road. Now music is not the only thing doing this, because now we must ask, what of Balenciaga? If in the corner of the world where I have been, in human consciousness there are religions that abuse and torment and murder children in exchange for gifts in the world from a force that has metaphysical power here as their belief system, then can that exist in human consciousness here? Balenciaga were creating an ad campaign where children were wearing bondage gear. They had dolls with them, teddy bears, in bondage sexual attire. And people stood up and said, this is not okay, it's not acceptable. But due to that, scrutiny became to fall upon their ads, and people began to look. And all of their secret symbology was exposed, and nothing has been said or done about it in a correct manner. There was a false notion that they were going to sue the one who created the ads, but 7 days later they dropped the case. And so let's take a look at what Balenciaga did. They placed these children around these sexually dressed dolls. But in another advert, they took a court document which was about a court case that protects children from sexual exploitation in the world of cyber media. They placed it on the table inside their advert prior to beginning these adverts which sexualize children, place them in this setting with this bondage gear. They did that. Why would they put that document inside this advert? Now, if you look further, the children in the adverts, there was a picture of the devil on the wall on one. Another child was laid in front of empty alcohol glasses asleep on a sofa. But one of the most telling things was that Balenciaga is spelled B-A-L. And there was some tape on the floor, you know, like yellow tape that you put around a crime scene perhaps. And they had altered the spelling of Balenciaga to have a double A, which spells Baal or Baal, however you pronounce it. However you wish to pronounce it, I hear many pronunciations. And Baal is the god of child sacrifice, biblically speaking. Now Baal and Baal is commonly placed in strange symbolic events around the world, and I'll get onto that shortly. But this was in their ad campaign. And so people scrutinized further, and they googled the name of a diploma hanging on the wall, and the man's name was that of a convicted child molester. They then googled and researched some of the books that were sitting on the desk, and the art inside those books were in reference to children being mutilated and cannibalism. It was all that kind of art by this particular artist. There was another book which spoke about the muscle reflex of an erect penis. This was laid underneath it. So there was all of this bizarre symbology inside their adverts surrounding whereby they'd started trying to drip feed, potentially, into society the normality of this bondage gear around children with a mainstream name. This all adds up to something. They were doing something. Now, I mentioned there Baal. I was born in the UK, and in the UK they have the Commonwealth Games, which is an Olympics for the UK. And the opening ceremony for that, the last one, was Baal, or Baal. And they were worshipping Baal in this ceremony in front of a tower of Babylon. And you can't make it up, because this religion is the backbone, if you look, of society's structure. People's unconsciousness, people's energy being manipulated and used, it's all based upon sexual impulse and hedonism. This is an endless entertainment. This is the whole focus of culture at this time. And therefore, if there is an invasive religious structure behind the scenes inside the West, which are worshipping the satanic, the selling of our energy into the satanic matrix of extraction, then Baal is the god that they are pointing at. And if humans in the part of the world where I've been openly are involved in these religions, it may still exist in human consciousness. And I will go further than that. Because the longer I've stayed in presence with God, the longer I've stayed free of a selfish self-identity, a me, a separate personal self that doesn't feel connection to everything. The longer I've stayed away from there, the more bandwidth of consciousness and reality I begin to decode. And I have seen the fallen. I take forces that are demonic off of human beings persistently. They are real, they are here. I have witnessed them, I have seen them. Are these large institutions, operations, celebrities in bed with these demonic forces knowingly? Or are they in bed with them because they're so hedonistically saturated that they're just spiritually barren? And so they're just an empty vessel that's possessed all of the time. I know that some make pacts with them. I'm aware that this happens. I'm aware that pacts are made with the fallen. And you see, the fallen, they need energy. And what they need is the light of God to fall. And it can only fall in a sentient life with free will. And when it does, that's their energy. That suffering, that fear, that indulgence in the worldly, in sin, which is to sell your vitality into selfish ambition and selfish pleasure instead of storing it to build it up for the will of the one who knit you together in your mother's womb to manifest your destiny, which will be a compassionate destiny. It will not be a hedonistic me, self destiny. And so their obsession with Baal could lead you to feel that perhaps all is lost. But the truth is that the equation's simple. The equation is keep you identified with your body and your mind. Because so long as you are identified with that, you have no power over them. Because they operate from a higher dimension than the 3D matrix. They operate from the 4D, we could say. And they have influence from there. But if a human, such as Yeshua, overcomes the 3D, the 4D, and elevates into a higher dimension, into the Christic dimensions, if a human, instead of obeying these beings who have hacked the source code of God, the generous heart of God pouring forth all things, they've hacked it and they're manipulating it. Hence Yeshua saying the God of this world, the ruler of this world is Satan. If a human overcomes their hacked code, they move closer to source code. This is the best terminology I can use. They move closer to source code, and therefore the programs that they write with their intention have more power and right over the top of the fallen source code, because it's coming from 4D to 3D, but a human can reach up to 8, 9, 10, 11, 12D, let's say. And this is the path of walking in the Christic, and when it happens that you, in your frequency, go beyond the 4th dimensional, rulers of this world, the demonic, when you go beyond there, when you come back to this 3D realm and you live from that higher connection, you have dominion, as Yeshua promised, to drive out demons, to pray in the Spirit. And I've even seen people heal. because they have dominion to command the forces of nature, because the 3D matrix, for all built on the source code of God, is interfered with by a higher dimensional force who choose the path of trying to supersede God through intellectual propagation. And they would lead us to the same, to be nothing but intellectual automatrons if they can. Because there we'll be hedonistic, because we'll feel voided from source, and there we'll pursue pleasure and sell our energy further into their extraction matrix. And so how do you stay free of this spell casting? How do you protect your family home? They're focusing on Baal, focus on the opposite. The power is in the Christic. The power is in the Christic, and the Christic is known when self is not. Too many people have misrepresented the Christic. Too many people have said, I'm Christian, and built a self that's Christian. But a human with an image that's Christian is carrying a self, but in the moments where there is no image, there the Christ energy can come through them. There the power of Christ can move in them in this realm. And that's why the Bible says you must die and Christ be born in your place. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. If God's will is to be done on earth, it must be done in a human organism. And that will must arrive inside the organism from that higher dimension, and there must be no self to say I agree or disagree in an ideal world. It arrives, it is known, and it animates the intelligence and the actions. And that's where we move in fasting and prayer. We abandon self. We release the worldly, that worldly one who believes that freedom is the pursuit of its every desire. We release its space of sitting in the throne of life, this separate little personal me. And we open up for the vastness of the Christic, of the will of unconditioned love from beyond this dimension to sit in the throne of our lives. And its power can be made manifest in you. But they rely on fear, suffering, hedonism, selling out your energy into the world. They rely on that. And they reward those who serve them with more of it. And so they constantly live out in this hedonism, hiding their weakness by constantly being stimulated by this 3D program, the world, the flesh, as Yeshua called it. But the average man has that spell cast on him, and every night he goes to bed wanting more, waking up wanting more, can't find it. It's a miserable existence. There's no contentment, there's no peace there. They are offering you an empty box, and people are taking the empty box because they are terrified that you would awaken your true spiritual capability and rise above the dimension of their catchment, as Yeshua did, and as all men can and do, some do, and have dominion over their presence in this world and purify them out of existence in your life and the lives of those around you. I guess that covers it. Black magicians and Balenciaga. Watch for it. Be conscious. Protect your children. Don't let them have these spells cast upon them. Don't let their subconscious be influenced by this music and these messages that comes through it. God bless, guys. All is well. God's got it.